Welcome back, everyone, to the Weird Reality Special Report. As always, I'm Logan Craft, bringing you the latest in the strange, unusual, and just plain weird. From beaver attacks to giant rubber ducks, we have a show for you today. It is officially the start of fall, and with that comes a plague America may not be ready for. Pumpkin spice, a seasonal delicacy, or the beginnings of a chemical warfare. More at 11. Now, if you had picked rabbit beaver for your 2021 bingo card, you are a winner. A 73-year-old man nearly met his end to an 80-pound rabid beaver. The man had been frequenting a secluded swimming hole for many years. However, today, he was not alone. As he swam, the rabid creature began to bite his legs and move up to his head until he could make it back on land. The man reportedly broke a knuckle trying to fend off the less than cuddly varmint. The belligerent beaver has been taken into custody, and the victim is on the road to recovery, and we all here at the Weird Reality Special Report wish him a speedy recovery. And maybe you should invest in some beaver hooks. Before we go on, Weird Realities is made possible by fans like you. Make sure to visit Weird Realities Redbubble store to get your hands on some exclusive merchandise. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers. You know, a little birdie told me that every sticker you put on your car gets you an extra 5 miles to the gallon. So don't miss out on your chance to show off your weird side. Breaking news. UFOs, do you believe? This month marks the 60th anniversary of the Barney and Betty Hill abduction. To bring you more on this is our boots on the ground special report field analyst Scott Baker.
Hello, Weird Realities. It's Scott Baker, your wandering adventurer. It is September 20th, and I am heading up to Lincoln, New Hampshire. All of you true UFO aficionados know exactly where I'm going. I am heading to the location where Betty and Barney Hill were abducted by aliens 60 years ago today. So this ought to be fun. Hang in tight. We're going to see some really cool stuff. For those of you who are not familiar with the Betty and Barney Hill abduction story, let me give you a brief background. Betty and Barney were an interracial couple, and I bring that up only because it has a later significance in the story. They were very tired. They had been working hard, and they took a 3-day vacation in Canada, Montreal, Niagara Falls, and Toronto. They were on their way home, and they stopped in the Green Mountains of Vermont to have a cup of coffee and grab a late night dinner. The two of them decided that since a huge storm was coming in, they wanted to make it back to their home in Portsmouth, New Hampshire before the rain hit. So they set out late that night from the diner in Vermont and headed home. While driving through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, they saw a white light following them, much too bright to be a star. Barney thought it might be a plane, even though it didn't move like an aircraft would. Betty thought it might be a satellite, but it kept on following them and was making weird maneuvers, so they stopped near a field. Barney got out, brought his pair of binoculars, and looked up. What he claims to have seen was a large saucer, the size, much larger than the size of a fighter jet, that had double windows, and 6 figures were looking down at him. Barney, of course, was a little bit freaked out, jumped in the car, and the two of them tried to escape. The last thing they remember was the UFO chasing them and landing on the roof of the car. The car started to slow down. They started to feel tired. Then they woke up later. They were 35 miles away from where they had originally been abducted, were exhausted, and were on their way back to Portsmouth. It was along this road that Benny and Barney Hill were abducted by a UFO. I'll describe the details of that abduction in a few minutes. What makes the Benny and Barney Hill story so fascinating isn't the fact of the abduction. In fact, there had been numerous claims of alien abduction before them. What makes it fascinating is that they remembered the details of their abduction. Not at first. It was about a week later, after they had arrived at Portsmouth. They knew something had gone on. They had lost 2.5 hours of time that they could not account for. Betty's dress had a tear in it. Barney's shoes had scuff marks on them that he couldn't explain. And the strap on his binoculars was broken. It was about a week after the abduction that Betty started to have dreams about what happened that night. And she related them to Barney, and the two of them began to recall. They had been stopped by the aliens. The aliens had used magnetic devices to stop the car. They were escorted out of the car in a friendly manner, and they were brought aboard the alien spaceship. The aliens walked them up a ramp. Betty recalled 2 aliens in particular. One she called the leader. The other one, who actually performed the examination, was called the examiner. They spoke English, though very broken. She could barely understand them. Once aboard the spaceship, the aliens did 2 separate tests on both Betty and Barney. They took samples of their hair, they took samples of their fingernails, and they took skin scrapings. They put them on slides like normal scientists would in a human lab. They also, with Betty, they stuck a needle into her stomach to see if she was pregnant. Betty recalled that the needle was excruciatingly painful, but with a wave of his hand, the leader stopped the pain. She asked them where they were from. He mentioned that there was no use in telling her because their galaxy was so far away, she'd never even understand where it was located. When they were done, they were put back aboard their car and they were sent home. And then sometime after that, on the ride back to Portsmouth, they both woke up. So once they got home and once they started having the dreams, they started to realize something was wrong and they wanted to find out what. Now, here comes the next aspect of the story, which does tend to give them a lot more credibility than others. They didn't come out immediately. They did not tell anyone. They researched it. They talked amongst themselves. They actually never admitted that they had been abducted by aliens until March 3rd, 1963, when they revealed that to a church group. After that revelation, the information was eventually passed to the U.S. government, and the U.S. government came out to investigate. It was decided that since a lot of these memories were probably repressed, that they should go see a psychiatrist, Dr. Fuller. This was in late 1963. Dr. Fuller talked to them, particularly Barney, brought out all the old memories, and this is when the entire story about the testing and the conversations came out. It wasn't until 1966 that the first book was written by Betty and Barney along with Dr. Fuller. So there are a lot of supporters of Betty and Barney Hill who say the fact that they didn't try to cash in on this from day one proves that this is a distinct possibility that this happened to them. Another strange aspect of this story is that Betty and Barney Hill were not your typical abductees. Most of the abductees were farmers, people who lived out in rural areas. Betty and Barney were an interracial couple, as I said earlier. That doesn't mean anything today, but back in 1961, it was frowned upon. So the question was, why would an interracial couple bring undue attention on themselves? Also, they were both highly educated. Barney was a veteran. He worked for the U.S. Post Office. Betty had a degree. She had gone to college, and she was working for the state of New Hampshire on social welfare issues. So we're not talking your average rube who gets picked up by a spaceship. And they recalled their instances. Now, the Dr. Fuller, who performed the psychiatric evaluation. So, as with every UFO phenomenon, it breaks down into 4 categories. You either believe these people are fabricating, that they're making it up, that they're attention seekers, that all they want to do is get their 15 minutes of fame and make $1. Okay? Doubtful in the case of Betty and Barney Hill because they waited so long. They kept the entire incident quiet. They didn't reveal it until March 3rd, 1963, when they revealed it to their church group. Eventually, the story made its way to the U.S. government. The U.S. government checked it. Operation Blue Book interviewed them for its program, and they recommended that Betty and Barney go see a psychiatrist, Dr. Fuller. Dr. Fuller believed that since a lot of these memories were repressed, that he might be able to get them out through psychiatric measures. He actually did. Most of the story of the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill was recreated under hypnosis. The other possibility, as you believe Betty and Barney Hill, as you believe most people who have seen UFOs, it's unexplained, it can't be accounted for, aliens do exist. That is a distinct possibility, and given the unique aspects of this case, there are a lot of people that put extreme credibility in Betty and Barney Hill. The other possibilities were they were mentally insane. They weren't. As I said, Betty worked for the state government. She was well respected. Barney had an IQ of 140. So we're not talking here somebody who could look up in the sky, see the moon, and claim it was a UFO. Ironically, the psychiatrist who did the evaluation came down on the side of they were not fabricators, but they were wrong. The reasoning behind his decision was he believed that Betty honestly believed that they had been abducted by aliens, even though they had not. And that through constantly talking with Barney, she eventually convinced Barney that the incident had occurred. Some of the aspects of this particular story by Dr. Fuller are amazing, and let me go over them quickly. Betty had always been an avid reader of science fiction. She loved science fiction novels. She gobbled them up. She even watched Outer Limits. And 2 weeks before the abduction, there was the Outer Limits episode. I don't remember the name of it, but when a gray-style alien came to Earth and announced its presence. Dr. Fuller believed that what they had suffered from was not the effects of an alien abduction, but was sleep deprivation. Barney worked long hours at the post office, was constantly tired. Not only was Betty a worker for the state of New Hampshire, both were active, very active, in the civil rights movement of the early 1960s. The trip was a long trip. They went from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to Niagara Falls, Toronto, Montreal. A lot of us here, I'm sure, have experienced the same thing. I know I have, that if you're on a long trip, you zone out. And you all of a sudden you come back an hour later and it's like, oh, I'm in another state. That was Dr. Fuller's analysis. They weren't lying. They weren't fabricating purposely, that they honestly believed it. And that it evolved from her fixation on the fantasies of science fiction. I don't know. I like to believe, I want to believe, I've never seen for myself. But it is one of the most fascinating stories in the history of UFOlogy. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot. If you got any questions, feel free to reach out to me or just go online and look it up yourself. There was a 1975 movie based on the Betty and Barney Hill story. I cannot remember the name of it. And as I said, there was also the 1966 book written by Dr. Fuller and Betty and Barney themselves. So enjoy, whether you believe or not. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. This is Scott Baker, your traveling adventurer, signing off for Wyrd Realities. Stay cool and keep it weird.
Townspeople of Belfast, Maine woke up at the crack of dawn to find a 25-foot yellow rubber duck with the word joy printed upon it floating in the harbor. While it remains a mystery just where the real-life quacking came from, it has fast become a favorite of the townspeople. However, rumors are circulating that it could have been lost by a giant simply trying to enjoy a bath. But until some large otherworldly creature comes to claim the duck, it will remain a symbol of joy in the harbor for all to see. And that concludes our news today for the Wyrd Realities Special Report. Once again, I would like to thank everyone for tuning in and catching this edition. I'm Logan Craft, signing off for Wyrd Realities. Stay weird.
So